Well, folks, we got another teaser for more nerfs on the way to Hearthstone. I swear sometimes this channel is just me talking about upcoming nerfs and then reporting the nerfs across various card games. But hey, that's fine. That works for me. But this is one of the Blizzard designers here, Aleko, talking about the upcoming balance patch coming later this month. It says they've been keeping an eye on feedback and we'll be working on the update. As mentioned in the patch notes, we'll be looking to do some more spicy changes than we did in the previous patch, and a soft goal for the patch will be to slow the game down slightly. So if you're feeling like the new Hearthstone meta is a little too fast, a little bit crazy with playing from hand, with lethality and high damage and all this burst damage stuff, hopefully the upcoming patch later this month will help ease a little bit of those high pressure, high speed things we're seeing in the meta, which I certainly hope so. That is not my favorite kind of Hearthstone. I was happily enjoying the 40 health Renathal world, but have been playing a little bit less standard since the Renathal nerf, but a little hope here in this patch. So I wanted to, as always, take a look at some of the cards I think are the biggest offenders right now when it comes to things like win rate or driving the top of the meta, especially some of those at higher legend, which Blizzard can often focus on. So I ran through the data on HS Replay, grabbed some cards I think are probably going to be at the forefront of the nerf discussion, but also identified a few targets for buffs as well that I think might be fitting. Usually when we see these big spicy patches, we see both sides of it, nerfs and buffs. And as always, I'm not actually recommending all of these changes. I will talk about them, whether or not I think they're good ideas. I'm merely saying I think this is how Blizzard will change the cards based on data and historical precedents, which sometimes we get right, sometimes we don't. But don't hate on me. So many of you ignore this every time and give me hate for like, oh, Regis, you suggested this card should be nerfed. No, I didn't. I told you it might be. And that is a very important difference. So that said, this card should be nerfed. I'll be very clear. Bran Bronzebeard has been driving too many problematic things in the Hearthstone meta these days. And frankly, most of the recent nerfs, or even really looking back across the entire year, many of the nerfed cards can trace their power level all the way back to Bran Bronzebeard, creating silly opportunities on those cards by doubling really powerful battle cries we've had throughout the year. If you just look at a list of nerf cards, you'll be like, oh yeah, that one did great with Bran. That was great with Bran. That was great with Bran. That was great with Bran. Perhaps Blizzard should look towards Bran as the centerpiece problem for all of these different cards and strategies, doing double the things they're supposed to. That gets pretty gross. But here's the deal. I don't actually think Bran is going to get nerfed. I think it's been too obvious of an offender across all of these other cards. And if Blizzard were going to do something about him, they already would have. I don't think he's going to rotate early either. Cora on the design team previously tweeted that they weren't really thinking Bran was going to rotate early, but his time was probably done at rotation. So I think best case scenario, they cave to pressure a little bit on Bran, even though they don't want to seem to touch this card, and maybe they push him to 4 mana. But ultimately, I think really they're going to keep Bran untouched. I suspect they see Bran as a net advantage in craziness and fun and chaos in Hearthstone, and they want big crazy things to happen. So they like that Bran does that, and they have to tweak other cards along the way. They probably still want people having fun with Bran. So I do think Bran needs a nerf. He just causes too many problems. He needs to rotate out soon too. That would solve it, of course. But man, I still don't actually have my hopes up much on this one. So next up for discussion, this card has to be in this video. If there's any card in the crosshairs for Blizzard, it's got to be Astalor Bloodsworn. This card is currently in over 65% of decks. That is crazy. I've never seen a card hit that kind of inclusion rate on HS Replay. Those are just bonkers stats. And of course, it's good as well. As we all know, he has tons of lethality. All the little beginner steps of Astalor often feel pretty good to play too. It's not like you're sacrificing much to get to that final step of Astalor. Some decks are now utilizing this with Bran again to great success. If you got any mana cheat, you can do 32 damage with Astalor, but you don't need to make Astalor a great card. And when it comes to nerfing this one, you know, it's a little hard for me to talk about nerfs on this one because it's such an elegant numerical design for Astalor. All of the numbers line up so well and so cleanly. And every time I want to nerf this, I want to maintain that numerical elegance or gracefulness or, you know, symmetry, if you will. So in this case, I tried again to do that by pushing him to 3 mana, 6 mana, and 9 mana, so that each card has the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10. You could maybe make the you know, armor or damage match the mana cost to retain even more symmetry there, but I thought this still had some of that elegance in the design maintained a little bit. But I do recognize this is a monster nerf because it effectively adds 3 total mana to the cost of Astalor, and I thought, man, is 3 mana too much for a nerf like this? And I thought, well, 65% play rate, that's crazy. I don't know that 3 mana is too much. And if you look at each of the cards individually, they kind of hold up okay at their respective mana costs. Astalor at the base level would be slightly worse, like, you know, SI7 agent. The middle version would be like a shield bearer for warrior or whatever. I think that's the name of that card. And then the final version, I think, would still be pretty darn good at 9 mana. Would just slow it down. It would make you sacrifice a little more mana along the way to get to that final step of Astalor. So you'd pay the price throughout the course of the game, having slightly weaker tempo plays, and then maybe not being able to weave in things like a hero power or other cards on that final Astalor step. So I think this would still be a really good card if these were the numbers, despite the triple nerf here, basically. So this could be the sort of thing they do for Astalor. They may not care as much about the numerical symmetry being maintained on Astalor and might just decide to nerf an individual step or throw some numbers out. You know, maybe Astalor only deals 6 damage on the final steps now, and although that's way less pretty, it might just be the right fix from a balance standpoint. So we'll see if Blizzard is as much of a stickler for the numbers here as somebody like me, or if they're just willing to make a good clean change for Astalor that's less pretty but perhaps more effective. So next up is Shock Spitter, and I think Blizzard's probably gonna have to up the mana cost on Shock Spitter one more time. If they do, I could certainly see them giving it some free stats, because the stats on Shock Spitter aren't really the relevant part of the card. Usually this is being used for big damage output. And again, this ties back to Bran, obviously, another crazy big battle cry that's doubled by Bran. Pushing it to 4 mana makes it really hard to get Brans down with these, or at least multiples of these in a single turn, which limits some of the crazy doubling that is possible. I honestly still think this is a good card at 4 mana in most cases, though, because even without the Bran, you know, if this is dealing 3-4 damage, that's not terrible in the scheme of the world. And if they give it stats to kind of match and make it more of a viable tempo card or just a mid-game swing card as opposed to only a lethal finisher, I think that's a much healthier version of the card. And I think people would be much happier with that. Even if you made this like a 4/4, for instance, that costs 4 mana, or, you know, 5 mana, 5/5, whatever it is, right? As long as the mana cost is increased and you reduce that combo options, I think people will be fine with this being a great mid-game card that scales up nicely. So I think that's the direction Blizzard will probably go. This is a deck that still, despite Shock Spitters already getting nerfed once, remains near the top of the meta. So I suspect this will have to take another pass of balance changes. So next up, moving over to Rogue, we have a couple different decks for Rogue I think Blizzard's going to take a close look at. Number one is Thief Rogue, with Wild Paw Knoll in particular proving as a standout card in the deck. When you look at the data, this has insane mulligan win rates and drawn win rates. Of course, getting a Wild Paw Knoll down to 0 can be a monster swing on board. These things have enough health that they're hard to deal with and can take some big tempo swings. And they're not hard to discount at all these days with Maestra, and we even got the new 2 mana potion belt, which the concoctions work with Wild Paw Knoll. Even though the belt kicks you out of Maestra, it still counts the discount on the concoctions beforehand, so it's a mega discount to the Wild Paw Knoll all in one, making this thing super quick to come down. Very reliable early game tool. And that means it's probably going to get changed yet again. This card has been through the ringer when it comes to balance changes. But I think Blizzard might push this pretty hard. I don't think they're going to want to change the mechanical interactions of Maestra or Potion Belt, just because that sounds like it's a lot more work to me. Not to mention, those are the more fun sorts of things. So I don't expect the changes to happen there, and I think they want the nerfs to often have visibility as well. So when you change the way things work behind the scenes, sometimes that can be hard to explain to people or hard to showcase. But if you just, you know, dump some extra numbers on the Wild Paw Knoll by pushing it to 7, you return it to that previous sort of speed of discount it might have had in the past, while retaining the functionality as it currently exists. So it's a little bit lower effort, lower maintenance, lower you know, communication toll on the card, while perhaps achieving the same goal. So in other words, that's my logic and reasoning for pushing this to 7 instead of back to 6. It just solves problems in that way, and really handles the card that I think is probably the outlier for performance in this deck. Now, I think the question is, would Knoll there be enough? It addresses both Miracle Rogue and Thief Rogue concerns, but I don't know that it would be enough on the Miracle Rogue side of things. So I wanted to take a look at one other card for Miracle Rogue, and it was hard to pick a culprit because there's so many great options. And, you know, a lot of them are sort of staple rogue cards, as I would call them. You know, you could always go after like Shadow Step or Preparation. Those cards seem nuts, but they feel so close to the identity of rogue. They've been around forever. You know, 0 mana cards is a rogue thing. Having some of those be good, I think is pretty important for the identity of the class. So I wanted to tackle something that was new instead of something that was old. I looked at Putricide, Ghoulish Alchemist, you know, Potion Belt, I already talked about a little bit. This to me seemed like the right sort of target. The other ones, you know, were less about mana cheat. If you look at like Putricide or Potion Belt, this is about mana cheat, which gets to the core of a lot of the things that Miracle Rogue is trying to do. So if you're going to preserve the 0 cost stuff that's old, maybe you tackle the 0 cost stuff that's new. I also looked at Scribbling Stenographer is an option, but that kind of felt like attacking the same problem as Wild Paw Knoll in a slightly different direction. This one seemed a little more interesting to me. Pushing Ghoulish Alchemist to 3 instead of 2 basically means, okay, if you're going to get your concoction for free, you got to spend the full mana on it ahead of time. So this still allows you to bake that 0 cost into future turns if you want to have your big blow up turn with your, you know, Drakas and your graveyards or whatever. So that's still there, but you're pushing back this by a turn, basically making more mana commitment happen here, so that you maybe delay that pop off by a little bit as opposed to getting it even earlier. This also changes the interaction with Shadow Step on this card so that you can't Shadow Step it to 0 and replay it for free. You got to spend a little bit more mana if you want to get some Shadow Step steps in there. So, you know, the fact that this was new solved some of those problems. That to me seemed like the right way to go, but frankly there's 4 or 5 different cards I think you could reasonably target in Miracle Rogue. Curious to hear everybody's thoughts on which ones you think are the best targets. I mean, you could also just go after Draka and Sinstone Graveyard and all those again, but since those already got adjusted, this direction seemed a little more sensible for me. So moving over to Demon Hunter, this is a really interesting conversation to have. So I think Quest Demon Hunter is going to need a nerf of some sort according to Blizzard, particularly at High Legend. It does really, really well. The mana discount on the quest itself is obscene. You know, I saw some comparisons between this and Ruined Mithril Rod in Warlock, and it's like, man, yeah, this is kind of like a 1 mana Ruined Mithril Rod that always starts in your hand. That's pretty gross. So, and in particular, they're not even using the final step of the quest, right? They just care about the discounts on the first and second steps of the quest. So it's almost like using the quest in a really weird way. You don't even need the Kurtrus at the end of it all. But when you look at nerfing this card, as you'll see here, I've got 2 options. Something really strange happens, because if you require them to draw additional cards, say you bump it from 4 to 5, okay, it's a little bit harder to pull off, but they get to discount an extra card because the reward has reduced the cost of the cards drawn by 1. So in some cases, you could argue a nerf to that number actually just gives them more discounts. Now, I still think that would be a nerf because increasing the number of cards, that's harder to do earlier in the game. It takes more mana and more time to get that done. gives other decks more time to get under that discount, and then the next step is also pushed back if the first step is delayed. So I do think, you know, pushing this to 5 or maybe even 6, I consider it as well, would probably ultimately end up in a nerf. But there is an intriguing argument that you could go the other way, and if you reduced the number of cards that were required to complete the quest, they would be able to reduce the cost of fewer things. If it said, you know, draw 3, they're only getting 3 cost reductions instead of 4. Maybe it's only even draw 2. If they don't care about the final step of the reward, this actually limits the total number of discounts possible. So it's done quicker, but they're not playing the Kurtrus anyway right now. Of course, that has implications down the road, but this card's about to rotate out of standard format in the next like 3 months or whatever, 4 months away. So, or really 3 months away. So, you know, you don't anticipate future decks worrying about the Kurtrus problem. So would it actually be better to push this down to 3 as opposed to up to 5? What do you guys think? I don't play this deck a lot. For anybody out there who has experience with Quest Demon Hunter, which of these would actually effectively be a bigger nerf in this case? I'm not totally sure. Another change for Demon Hunter I think we might see is to Sinful Brand. This card definitely under the radar all throughout the last expansion, despite the fact that yours truly gave it a great review. Thought this card was going to be awesome. And it finally has been. It's a really good lethal finisher in these decks using this with the new 4-drop that summons a bunch of tokens. You can hit people for 4 and then trade in 4 tokens for an additional 8 damage. Or if you have multiples of these, of course, can go even harder. And sometimes the potential's even higher if you got other stuff laying around. So all in all, Sinful Brand can be a huge, like 1 mana deal 8 or something, right? It's a 1 mana Pyroblast sometimes. 1 mana deal 10. That's kind of insane for 1 mana if you're able to line all that up. And I think Blizzard might push this to 2 in particular, with Quest discounting it, goes from 1 to 0. Very, very easy to weave into a turn. Pushing it up to 2 just makes it a little bit harder to get all that weaved into a turn. Makes the Quest discounts a little less. I think this card would still have a lot of lethality. Of course, you don't change the mechanics here, so would still probably be pretty good. Just a little bit harder to get going. Make all those turns a hair slower. That all starts to add up. So next up, this one might surprise some people, but I think Belinda Stonehearth is a really, really strong card when you look at the data in Big Spell Mage, which is both a really good deck right now in Hearthstone, particularly Diamond and Legend, and really popular deck as well. It's something people are seeing a lot. Belinda has nutty numbers for a 6-drop in particular, the highest mulligan win rate card of the deck, despite being a 6-drop often. That's a bit of a warning sign we've seen in the past when it comes to Blizzard balance changes. So would it be crazy to push Belinda to 7? Slow that down a little bit. I would almost be kind of sad by this change. I don't think I'd want to see that. Big Spell Mage is the kind of deck I'm okay with being good. It does some cheesy things with mana cheat sometimes, but it's all happening pretty late in the game. People have opportunities to beat it, and it's not an oppressive deck at all from a win rate standpoint. So although this card is an outlier, this card's a standout, I hope it goes under the radar in this case. I don't want Big Spell Mage to be the most prominent deck in the meta, but I'm okay with it being a pretty good deck, and it's actually one of the slower decks we have right now in Hearthstone. So kind of hope this change doesn't happen, but you know, they said spicy changes. I'm expecting some surprising things. I think this one could be one of those targets we're not really expecting to see, but is still snuck into the patch. So I also wanted to talk about buffs. If we're getting a big spicy patch, I think buffs have to be a part of that conversation. And I was thinking the one thing about the expansion right now that seems to have fallen a little bit flat is the undead minion type. Now, there are a lot of undead minions getting played, but they're just kind of incidentally undead. It's not because they're undead or playing towards the undead synergy stuff, particularly looking at like Unholy Death Knight that is whiffed. So that fantasy of the swarm of undead minions overwhelming you, I don't think that's really been achieved. So I think Blizzard might take another pass at early game undead stuff. Particularly, I think some 1-drops getting buffed could be a big deal, because if you're trying to get those undead synergies where an undead has died on the last turn, you kind of need to get stuff down early, and you need to have stuff played out every turn to continue the chain of undead deaths. Also, for Unholy Death Knight, you need corpses as soon as possible So having 1-drops to make sure you're getting your corpses rolling sooner can be helpful. So I took a look at Arms Dealer. This seems like one of the best build around possible cards for early game 1-drops that you want to play out, because if it sticks, you get some awesome buffs. If it dies, you're getting your undead chains going. So it's kind of serving two purposes there. So adding some extra survivability to this card seemed relevant. You might say, well, then it's less likely to get you corpses. Sure, but it's more likely to get you buffs, ensuring that swarmy start that you're looking for. And even if it's living, you know, an extra turn, that's fine. It's still eventually going to linger around to get you a corpse, and you need it perhaps on turn 3 instead of turn 2, which can still line up rather nicely. So this just seemed like a good, easy fix. There are some other options as well for 1-drop undead that didn't seem quite as clean to buff to me, but stuff like this I think would be good. I'm not saying this is the only change necessary, but this is an example of one. And on the other side of things, I thought it might also be nice to look at sort of the top end of the undead swarm and what that could look like. And Invincible to me at 8 mana, it just feels too slow. We saw this getting utilized in Death Rattle Rogue when it was good because they could buff it or discount it, excuse me, and cheat it out early and do all kinds of crazy stuff there. But without that mana cheat possible, I think you just need to make this card cheaper if you're going to try to play it into a more swarmy or minion-y tempo style deck. 8 mana is just too much for that. Frankly, I would almost be willing to push this to 6. It just feels like it's doing too much. But, you know, if it's like a 6 mana 4/4 that gave 4/4 buffs, that might be in line. Just to help it get closer to some of the other undead swarm stuff earlier in the game, because it feels like there's a bit of a gap between the early game and something like Invincible. But bringing it down at least a mana seems fitting, gives you some top end perhaps for some of those undead synergies. I mean, having such an iconic character like Invincible not getting played makes me a little bit sad, and particularly since this ties into undead synergies so closely, seems like a potential target for a buff. I also wanted to take a look at what an Unholy card buff might look like. We already saw some of these happen. We saw some of the like non-typed cards get buffed for Death Knight as well. I think they probably need to do more because Unholy is still lingering behind. You know, again, I'm not saying this is the only buff possible. There could be 3 or 4 things buffed perhaps to bring Unholy to the right level. But, you know, this seemed like a freebie. Why don't we just make that corpse guy here a little bit bigger? Make him a 2/2 instead of a 1/2. There are already plenty of 2/2 taunts out there in the world of Unholy Death Knight. So why not just make the Risen Footman another 2/2 taunt? Yeah, it would be good, but that's what you need. You need to make cards better, right? They have to be powerful. I also thought, what if this could just raise multiple corpses, like up to 3 corpses as 1/2 taunts? That seemed a little scarier to me, just getting so many taunts on board, so this seemed like a good fit. Adding some power here, but not going absolutely crazy. Another class I think needs some help is Warrior. And we've already talked about some Thora Balor buffs in previous videos. We haven't seen those land yet. I think if Thora Balor revived endlessly, that'd be fine. I also considered it being maybe like a 5/5. If it's not going to revive all the time, maybe just make it bigger off the base stat line. I don't know, man. There's a lot of ways to fix Thora Balor right now. But I hate the notion that Thora Balor is limited specifically to fire synergies. And I think Warrior probably needs help across more than this one really specific parasitic package of fire synergies. So I thought, what if we look at Light of the Phoenix instead? This is a card that can be a great fire synergy card because it's fire typed, of course. Can be a great enraged synergy card because it synergizes with damaged characters. But it can also be a good just card draw card for Warrior, which can definitely help any version, because if you lower this to 3 mana at a base level, it's an Arcane Intellect at its base, but very, very often you're going to have a damaged hero. You'll have taken damage, even if you're a control warrior. You take a chip damage early in the game before you start armoring up, and then this becomes a 2 mana draw 2, which just feels good for a lot of decks to be able to run a 2 mana draw 2. That consistency is really, really nice. And if you do happen to have a damage minion or whatever, very quickly goes down to 1 or 0, making it an incredibly efficient card draw tool. Again, yes, this would be a powerful card, but that's what you need for Warrior to start catching up to these other classes. It's really hard right now for Warrior to compete. You know, there are some rumblings of control warriors looking better, and enraged warriors technically okay, but I still don't think long term that solves the problems Warriors had as of late. And adding some power to a card like Light of the Phoenix could both help it in the fire world of this expansion and beyond as well. So there you go. Those are the possible nerfs and buffs I think we could see in Hearthstone in this teased balance patch. Man, I feel like we've gotten so many patches lately. I guess this would be the third one of this expansion cycle. It's kind of hard to keep track. My brain's getting all mixed up on where cards started. I was like, did Null's been changed multiple times, right? I'm having trouble remembering all of this over the last year or whatever. It's gotten a lot of changes. But I'm curious what you guys think. Number one, are you sick of balance changes? Do you think we need them? Do you think we're getting the wrong ones? I want to hear all those thoughts about where you stand. You know, it's like snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap type of thing. It's hard to keep track sometimes of where the meta is going, but I like getting your feedback on how you're feeling about the state of the game and state of the meta and so on. I am definitely happy to hear that things might be slowing down. That's always nice to know. I prefer a slightly slower Hearthstone. If you're gonna play quick games, I want Marvel Snap. If I'm gonna play long, awesome, grindy games, that's where Hearthstone shines to me. I want those 15-20 minute bangers of games. So the more of those I can get, the better, the happier I'm gonna be. I hope we get some duels changes as well. That's not something I talked about in this video, but could really use some duels changes, I think, on top of all this. Some of this would help, but even more might be better. So that said, yeah, thanks as always for watching. Stay tuned for whenever this update hits. Sounds like it might be a couple weeks away. The way they described later this month. We're really early in the month, so who knows? But you know, we'll get you a. But you know, I'll get you a video when the news lands. So just stay tuned. Thanks always for watching, and until next time, game on.